Emily Carter had exactly 7 minutes to hide every trace that her 3-year-old daughter existed before the owner of the Harrington estate walked through that door, and her entire world depended on those 7 minutes. The call from Ethan Harrington's assistant had come through 20 minutes ago, clipped and formal. Mr. Harrington was returning from his business trip early, arriving within the half hour instead of next week. Emily's hands trembled as she grabbed Lily's coloring books from the marble kitchen island, her daughter's innocent laughter echoing through the cavernous halls like evidence of a crime Emily hadn't meant to commit. Sunshine Daycare had closed unexpectedly that morning, burst pipe, they'd said, and Emily had made the desperate calculation that bringing Lily to work was better than losing the job that kept their studio apartment and put food on their table. She'd been so careful, keeping Lily in the far guest wing, quiet and occupied with crayons and her favorite stuffed rabbit. But now the man who owned this monument to wealth and solitude was coming home, and single mothers who broke the rules didn't get second chances in houses like this. Emily had been cleaning the Harrington estate for 8 months, ever since the agency placed her here after her previous position ended. The job was a lifeline she couldn't afford to lose. It paid 3 times what she'd made at the hotel, enough to finally start chipping away at the medical debt from Lily's birth, when complications had nearly taken them both and her ex-boyfriend had walked out before the discharge papers were signed. She'd built her life on reliability, on being invisible, on making sure the people who employed her never had reason to remember she existed beyond the spotless floors and perfectly arranged cushions. Bringing a child into this space violated everything she knew about survival. "Mama, where are we going?" Lily asked, her small hand clutching the rabbit as Emily scooped her up, heading toward the service entrance. The little girl's brown curls bounced against Emily's shoulder, her voice carrying that pure trust that broke Emily's heart daily, the trust that Mama would always keep her safe, would always know what to do. "We're just going to wait by the car for a few minutes, sweetheart," Emily whispered, her mind racing through exit strategies. She could text the supervisor, claim a family emergency, take the absence hit and hope Harrington never knew. Or she could stay, finish her shift after he settled into his private wing, pray he never ventured into the spaces she occupied. She was halfway across the grand foyer, Lily giggling at their sudden adventure, when the front door swung open and Ethan Harrington stepped inside. He looked exactly like his rare photographs, tall, angular, dark hair showing threads of early gray despite being only 34, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Emily's car. But the pictures never captured the exhaustion that clung to him like a second skin, the way his shoulders carried some invisible weight that made him seem both powerful and profoundly alone. His gray eyes swept the foyer with the detached assessment of someone who'd long stopped seeing his home as anything but architecture. Those eyes landed on Emily. Then on the child in her arms. Time crystallized into something thick and suffocating. Emily's throat closed. This was it, the moment her carefully constructed stability shattered. She should apologize, should explain, should do something other than stand frozen while her daughter twisted in her arms to see what had captured Mama's attention so completely. Lily's face lit up the way it always did when she saw new people, that fearless, joyful openness that Emily both cherished and worried over. Before Emily could stop her, before the careful words of explanation could form, Lily pursed her tiny lips and blew Ethan Harrington a kiss across the marble expanse of his foyer. The gesture hung in the air between them like something magical and impossible. Ethan Harrington went completely still. Emily watched something crack in his expression, some wall or defense she hadn't even realized was there until she saw it fracture. His hand lifted unconsciously toward his chest, as though the blown kiss had actually landed there and he needed to confirm it was real. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 years, nobody moved. Then Ethan Harrington's mouth curved into the smallest, most unexpected smile Emily had ever witnessed, soft and genuine and utterly transformed from the cold distance she'd braced herself against. "Hello," he said quietly, his voice directed at Lily but his eyes flickering to Emily with something that looked almost like understanding. "That was very kind of you." Lily beamed, completely unaware she'd just done something extraordinary. Emily's carefully prepared apology dissolved on her tongue, replaced by confusion and the dangerous flutter of hope. But as Ethan Harrington's expression settled back into its careful neutrality and his attention finally focused fully on Emily, she realized this moment of unexpected grace might be even more dangerous than his anger would have been, because the way he was looking at her now suggested this encounter was far from over, and whatever came next would change everything she thought she knew about her place in this world. The first words out of Emily's mouth should have been an apology, but what came instead was the raw truth of a mother trying desperately to protect her daughter from disappointment. The daycare had an emergency closure, and I didn't have anyone else. I'll take a personal day, I'll make up the hours, I just need this job. Ethan Harrington studied her with an intensity that made Emily feel transparent, like he could see through to the ledger of her life, the overdue bills, the night shifts she'd worked before this position, the times she'd chosen between groceries and gas. His silence stretched until it became unbearable, until Emily was ready to gather Lily and walk out with whatever dignity she could salvage. "What's her name?" he asked instead. The question landed so differently from what Emily expected that she answered before thinking, "Lily." "She's 3. "Lily," Ethan repeated, testing the name like something rare. He hadn't moved from the doorway, still holding his leather briefcase, but something in his posture had shifted, less the lord of the manor, more just a tired man trying to solve a problem. "Ms. Carter, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. How often does this happen?" Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. Honesty was a luxury she couldn't typically afford, but the way he'd asked, no anger, just genuine question, pulled the truth from her. "This is the first time. I've been with your agency for 3 years, at this property for 8 months. I've never mixed my personal life with my work. Never. But this morning I had a choice between bringing her here for a few hours or missing my shift entirely, and I thought," she stopped, realizing how desperately she was pleading her case to a man who had every right to fire her on the spot. "You thought you could manage both," Ethan finished quietly. "You thought if you were careful enough, competent enough, you could make the impossible work because you had to." The understanding in his voice broke something loose in Emily's chest. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Ethan set down his briefcase with deliberate care, and when he looked up again, Emily saw something in his eyes that looked almost like recognition, like he'd found a mirror to something inside himself. "I'm going to make you an offer, Ms. Carter, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. I don't need a housekeeper who ghosts through my home twice a week. I need someone to make this place feel less like a mausoleum and more like a space where people actually live. I need someone who understands that perfection isn't the same as warmth." Emily's confusion must have shown on her face, because he continued, his words gaining momentum as though he'd been thinking about this longer than just this moment. "I'm proposing you take on a different role. Live-in estate manager. You and Lily would move into the East Wing. It has its own entrance, 3 bedrooms, a living area. Your responsibilities would expand beyond cleaning to managing household operations, coordinating with vendors, making decisions about how this space functions. The pay would reflect the increased responsibility." He named a figure that made Emily's knees go weak. "Lily would have stability, you'd have security, and I'd have someone who might actually care whether this house feels like a home or just an investment property." The offer was insane. Generous to the point of impossibility. Emily's every instinct screamed that people like Ethan Harrington didn't hand opportunities like this to people like her, not without strings, not without catches. "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it, blunt and suspicious and desperately needed. Ethan's smile returned, sad around the edges. "Because 3 months ago, I sat in a doctor's office and heard words like, irregular results and further testing, and we caught it early. Because I spent 6 weeks wondering if this empty house would be the last thing I saw before I died alone. Because I got the all clear 2 weeks ago and realized I'd been given a second chance at a life I wasn't even really living." He glanced at Lily, who was now examining her rabbit's ears with intense toddler focus. "Because your daughter just reminded me what it feels like to be offered something kind without calculation. And because I'm tired of pretending that success and loneliness are supposed to go hand in hand." The honesty was staggering, vulnerable in a way Emily hadn't imagined possible from a man who lived in a house with its own ballroom. She thought about her cramped studio, about Lily's makeshift bedroom that was really just a corner with a curtain, about the way her daughter deserved more than Emily's constant exhaustion and anxiety could provide. "I'd need everything in writing," Emily said quietly, the lawyerless woman's attempt at protecting herself. "I'd need to understand exactly what you're expecting." "Of course," Ethan agreed immediately. "We'll have contracts drawn up. Everything professional and clear. You can have your own attorney review them." He paused, and something almost playful crossed his features. "Though I should warn you, Lily will probably end up with her own wing if she keeps being this charming." Despite everything, Emily almost laughed. The sound came out strange and choked, caught between disbelief and the first flicker of something that might be hope. But as Lily tugged on her sleeve, asking in her bright voice if the nice man had any cookies, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads where every path led somewhere she couldn't predict, and the choice she made in the next few seconds would reshape not just her life, but her daughter's future in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. 3 weeks later, Emily stood in the kitchen of the East Wing watching Ethan Harrington teach her daughter how to make pancakes, and the domesticity of the moment terrified her more than poverty ever had. The transition had happened faster than Emily's anxiety could process. The contracts had been fair, shockingly fair, reviewed by a legal aid attorney who'd actually seemed impressed. The East Wing had been transformed from elegant emptiness into something that felt dangerously close to home, with Lily's drawings hung in frames that probably cost more than Emily's monthly salary used to be. Ethan had honored every boundary Emily established, professional and respectful, until gradually those boundaries had started to feel less like protection and more like walls keeping out something genuine. "No, like this," Ethan was saying, demonstrating the wrist flip to Lily, who stood on a step stool beside him wearing an apron that had been custom-made in her size. Flour dusted his expensive shirt. He'd stopped wearing suits at home after the first week, switching to casual clothes that made him look younger, more real. "You want to be confident. The pancake can sense fear." Lily giggled, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth that Emily had spent years trying to create on her own. "Pancakes can't sense anything. They're food." "Oh really?" Ethan challenged, his smile wide and unguarded in a way Emily suspected most people never saw. "Then explain why mine always turn out perfect and yours keeps looking like a map of Florida." "Because you're old and I'm 3. Lily announced with the devastating logic of toddlers. Ethan clutched his chest in mock injury. "Old? I'm 34. That's basically still young." "That's what old people say," Lily informed him seriously, and Emily had to turn away to hide her laughter, busying herself with coffee she didn't need just to have somewhere to direct the feeling swelling in her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. The arrangement was supposed to be professional, boundaried, safe. But Ethan had slowly, carefully, built something else entirely. He'd started joining them for dinner occasionally, then regularly. He'd asked if Lily could keep him company while he worked in his study, claiming her chatter helped him think. He'd shown up with a rescued kitten last week, saying he'd found it near the property entrance and thought Lily might help him name it. The kitten, now christened Mr. Whiskers in true toddler fashion, currently wound between Emily's ankles, mewing for attention. Emily had watched it happen with the paralyzed fascination of someone watching a beautiful dream they knew they'd have to wake from. Because men like Ethan Harrington didn't actually build real families with their housekeepers. This was temporary kindness, charity wrapped in warmth, and Emily needed to remember that before Lily got too attached, before Emily herself got too attached. "What do you think, Emily?" Ethan's voice pulled her back. He was holding up a catastrophically misshapen pancake, Lily beaming beside him. "Museum quality or garbage disposal?" "I think it's perfect," Emily said softly, meaning more than just the pancake, hating herself for meaning it. Ethan's eyes met hers across the kitchen, and something passed between them, acknowledgement, understanding, the weight of all the things they weren't saying. He'd been careful never to cross lines, never to make Emily feel pressured or uncomfortable, but there were moments like this when the air itself seemed charged with possibility. "Mama, can Ethan be my daddy?" Lily asked suddenly, with the casual devastation only children could deliver. The question detonated in the space between them. Emily felt her face flush hot, scrambling for words that wouldn't crush her daughter's hope while still maintaining the reality of their situation. "Sweetheart, Ethan is our friend, but—" "Actually," Ethan interrupted gently, crouching down to Lily's level on her step-stool, "I'd be honored if you wanted to think of me that way, Lily. But that's a big thing, and it's something your mama and I would need to talk about a lot first. Is that okay?" Lily considered this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice, then nodded. "Okay. But you should talk fast because I already told Mr. Whiskers you're my daddy and he seemed really happy about it." Ethan laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and when he stood and looked at Emily again, there was a question in his eyes that made her heart race with equal parts longing and terror. Later, after Lily was in bed and Emily was finishing the evening tasks, she found Ethan in the main library, staring out the window at grounds illuminated by carefully placed lights. He looked like a man wrestling with something larger than himself. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly, not turning around. "About being honored. Emily, these past 3 weeks have been the first time in years this house has felt like it had a heartbeat. You and Lily, you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." "Ethan, you need to understand something," Emily said, forcing herself to be brave, to protect them both from the inevitable heartbreak. "I'm grateful for this opportunity, more than I can express. But my daughter is already falling in love with you." "I'm already," she stopped, unable to finish. "We can't afford to confuse temporary kindness with something permanent. You're going to meet someone from your world, someone appropriate, and this arrangement will need to return to what it was supposed to be. Professional. Boundaried." Ethan turned to face her, his expression fierce in a way she'd never seen. "What if I don't want someone from my world? What if I'm standing here looking at exactly who I want, terrified I'm going to screw this up because I've never felt this way before and I have no idea how to do this right?" The confession hung between them like a dare, like a promise, like the most dangerous and beautiful thing Emily had ever heard, and she knew, with absolute certainty, that everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. The woman who appeared at the estate entrance 4 days later looked like she'd stepped out of a luxury magazine, all sharp elegance and calculated beauty, with the kind of confidence that came from never having to wonder if you belonged. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with practiced charm as she swept past Emily without acknowledgement, "I see Ethan's still collecting strays. How wonderfully consistent." Emily had been arranging fresh flowers in the main foyer when the doorbell rang, Lily coloring contentedly nearby. Now she stood frozen as this stranger moved through the space like she owned it, her designer heels clicking against marble with territorial familiarity. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Harrington isn't expecting anyone," Emily managed, finding her professional voice though her instincts screamed warnings. "If you'd like to make an appointment." The woman laughed, the sound crystalline and cruel. "Appointment? Darling, I don't need appointments. I'm Victoria Ashworth. Ethan's fiancée." "Well, former fiancée, but really, we both know that's just a temporary technicality." The name hit Emily like a physical blow. She'd heard it exactly once, mentioned in passing by the estate's gardener, something about a high society engagement that had imploded dramatically 2 years ago. Ethan had never spoken of it, had never given any indication his past included someone who looked at the world like it was a chessboard she was perpetually winning. "I'll let Mr. Harrington know you're here," Emily said carefully, reaching for the house phone. "Don't bother, I already texted him I was coming." Victoria's gaze swept over Emily with the kind of assessment usually reserved for furniture or livestock, lingering dismissively on Emily's simple work clothes, her pulled-back hair, her complete lack of the polish Victoria wore like armor. "So you're the latest project? The one he's playing house with? How delightfully predictable." Ethan always did have a weakness for lost causes. The words were designed to wound, and they landed with precision. Emily felt her face heat, felt the old familiar shame of being looked at and found wanting by people who'd never had to fight for anything. "Mama?" Lily's small voice cut through the tension. She'd abandoned her coloring and now stood partially behind Emily's legs, her usual exuberance dampened by the stranger's hostile energy. "Who's the mean lady?" Victoria's perfectly painted mouth tightened. "Charming. He's playing father now too. This is even more pathetic than I imagined." "That's enough." Ethan's voice cracked through the foyer like a whip. He stood at the top of the main staircase, his expression thunderous in a way Emily had never witnessed. In 3 weeks of careful kindness, she'd never seen this version of him, cold, commanding, radiating barely controlled fury. "Victoria, you have exactly 2 minutes to explain why you're in my home uninvited before I call security." Victoria's smile never wavered, though something predatory entered her eyes. "Don't be dramatic, darling. I'm here about the foundation gala next month." "The one you're co-chairing? The one that's been on the calendar for 6 months? Surely you didn't think you could avoid me forever just because you've decided to play middle-class domestic fantasy." "The gala is a professional obligation that I'll fulfill professionally," Ethan said, descending the stairs with measured control. "It doesn't give you license to show up at my private residence and insult my guests." "Guests?" Victoria's laugh was sharp. "Is that what we're calling the help now? How progressive." She turned to Emily with false sweetness. "No offense, dear. I'm sure you're perfectly adequate at whatever it is you do here." Emily felt the words land like acid, felt years of being invisible and dismissed rush back with suffocating clarity. But before she could respond, before Ethan could intervene, Lily stepped forward with the fearless moral clarity only children possessed. "You're not nice," she announced to Victoria, her small voice ringing with certainty. "And Ethan doesn't like mean people. He told me kindness is the most important thing. You should leave." The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's perfect composure cracked just slightly, her eyes widening at being dressed down by a 3-year-old. Ethan's expression transformed from anger to something like awe, his gaze dropping to Lily with unmistakable pride. "Well," Victoria recovered, her smile now tight and venomous. "I see the child has been taught to speak above her station. How modern. Get out." Ethan's words were quiet but absolute. "Now. And Victoria? If you ever speak to or about Emily or Lily that way again, I will pull my family's entire charitable contribution from any organization you're affiliated with. Are we clear?" For the first time, genuine emotion flickered across Victoria's face: shock, fury, calculation. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. These people aren't your family. They're a phase, a reaction to your health scare. When you come to your senses, don't expect me to be waiting." "I'm counting on it," Ethan said flatly. Victoria left with as much dramatic flair as she'd arrived, and the moment the door closed behind her, Ethan turned to Emily with an expression caught between apology and desperation. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you she might try something like this. She's been circling since she heard about my health issues, convinced we're destined to reconcile." Emily nodded, still processing, still feeling the acid of Victoria's words burning in her chest. But it was Lily who broke through her paralysis, tugging on Ethan's hand with urgent concern. "Are you going to marry the mean lady?" she asked, her voice small and worried. "Because I don't think she likes pancakes." Ethan knelt down, gathering Lily into a gentle hug. "I'm never going to marry the mean lady. I promise. People who can't be kind don't get to be part of our family. Our family." The words hung in the air like a declaration, like a promise, like the most dangerous and hopeful thing Emily had ever heard, and as Ethan's eyes met hers over Lily's curls, she knew the real battle was just beginning. The Harrington Foundation Charity Gala was exactly the kind of event Emily had spent her entire life watching from the outside: glittering, exclusive, populated by people who measured worth in investment portfolios and social connections. "I don't belong here," Emily said for the 10th time, staring at her reflection in the full-length mirror of the East Wing bedroom. The dress Ethan had insisted on providing was beautiful, midnight blue, elegant without being showy, expensive enough to blend but not so flashy as to seem like she was trying too hard. But no amount of beautiful clothing could erase the fundamental truth that she was a single mother from a studio apartment, about to walk into a room full of people who would see through her in seconds. "You belong wherever you decide you belong," Ethan said from the doorway, his tuxedo fitting him like it was designed specifically for his frame, which it probably was. "Emily, I need you there. Not as my employee, not as an obligation. I need you there because you make me better, and I want everyone to see that." He'd been building to this for 2 weeks, ever since Victoria's ambush. The gala had originally been just his professional obligation, but he'd reframed it as something else, a statement, a declaration, a way to make clear to everyone in their social circle exactly where Emily and Lily stood in his life. Emily wasn't naive enough to miss what that meant, or brave enough to fully accept it. "Victoria will be there," Emily said quietly. "She'll make a scene. She'll find ways to humiliate me, to prove I don't fit. Ethan, I can't be the reason your professional reputation gets damaged." Ethan crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands with the kind of gentleness that always undid her. "Victoria's opinion stopped mattering to me the day she told me my health scare was inconvenient timing for her social calendar. Emily, do you know what matters? Lily fell asleep tonight telling me about her day, calling me her family. You've made this house feel like a place worth living in. That's real. Everything else is just noise." The sincerity in his eyes nearly broke her. Emily wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love, because that's what this was, what they'd been dancing around for weeks, could actually be enough to bridge the impossible gap between their worlds. The gala itself was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, in a ballroom that probably cost more to rent than Emily had earned in the past year. The moment they walked in together, Emily felt the weight of every eye in the room turning to assess, to judge, to calculate what her presence meant. Victoria descended within minutes, resplendent in red, flanked by 2 women who looked cut from the same expensive cloth. "Ethan, darling. And you brought your friend. How unexpected." The word "friend" dripped with implications that made Emily's skin crawl. "Emily is here as my partner," Ethan said clearly, his hand warm against the small of Emily's back. "I thought that was obvious." "Oh, it's obvious," Victoria purred. "The question is whether it's sustainable. After all, charity cases are one thing, but actual partnerships require compatibility. Tell me, Emily, what exactly do you bring to this relationship besides the obvious gratitude for your improved circumstances?" The words were designed to reduce Emily to exactly what Victoria saw, a gold digger, a user, someone taking advantage of Ethan's kindness. Emily felt her face flush, felt years of being looked down on crystallize into this single moment of public humiliation. But before she could respond, a silver-haired woman in an emerald gown materialized beside them, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Victoria Ashworth, are you still boring people with your opinions? I thought we'd all agreed that was tiresome 3 seasons ago." The newcomer turned to Emily with a warm smile that reached her eyes. "You must be Emily Carter. I'm Margaret Harrington, Ethan's mother. I've been hearing wonderful things about you and your daughter." Emily's world tilted. Ethan had mentioned his mother lived in Boston, that they spoke regularly but rarely visited. He'd never mentioned she'd be here, never warned Emily she'd be walking into this particular test. Margaret linked arms with Emily like they were old friends. "Come, dear. Let's let Ethan handle whatever tedious committee business brought him here. I want to hear all about how you've managed to make my son smile again. He's sent me pictures of that adorable child of yours, Lily, yes? The one with the exceptional taste in kitten names?" As Margaret expertly extracted Emily from Victoria's orbit, navigating through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd been attending events like this for decades, Emily felt her panic begin to recede. Margaret asked genuine questions, about Lily, about Emily's background, about her plans for the estate, and listened to the answers like they actually mattered. "My son is in love with you," Margaret said finally, when they'd found a quiet corner near the terrace. "He hasn't said it explicitly, but I raised him. I know what it looks like when Ethan Harrington stops guarding his heart. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Emily's throat tightened. "I don't know if I'm brave enough to believe this is real. People like me don't get fairy tales." "People like you?" Margaret's eyes sharpened. "You mean mothers who protect their children? Women who work hard and maintain their dignity? Dear, those are exactly the people who deserve fairy tales." She paused, her expression softening. "Ethan nearly died this year. Did he tell you that? The tests they ran found markers that could have turned into something devastating. When he got the all clear, he called me crying, saying he'd just realized he'd been so busy building an empire he'd forgotten to build a life. Then he met you, and everything changed." The confession landed in Emily's chest like a weight and a gift simultaneously. Before she could respond, a commotion near the main stage drew their attention. Ethan stood at the microphone, his expression determined in a way that made Emily's heart race with equal parts excitement and terror. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with absolute clarity, and every instinct Emily possessed screamed that whatever came next would change absolutely everything. Ethan Harrington stood before 300 of the city's most influential people and did something that would either cement his reputation or destroy it completely. He told the truth. "Many of you here tonight have known me for years," he began, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of emotion that made the room go silent. "You've seen me build businesses, chair committees, fulfill all the obligations that come with the family name. But until 3 months ago, I'd never actually thought about what I was building it all for." Emily stood frozen near the terrace with Margaret, her heart hammering so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. Beside her, Margaret squeezed her hand with knowing firmness. "3 months ago, I got a health scare that put everything in perspective," Ethan continued. "And shortly after, I met someone who taught me the difference between existing and living. Emily Carter came into my home as a housekeeper, but she became something far more important. She became family. She and her daughter Lily reminded me that success without connection is just expensive loneliness." The murmurs started then, rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Emily could see Victoria's face contorting with barely suppressed rage, could feel the weight of dozens of judgments being formed and reformed as society's machinery processed this deviation from acceptable behavior. Tonight was supposed to be about charity, about giving back to those less fortunate, Ethan said, his eyes finding Emily across the crowded room and holding her gaze with unwavering intensity. "But I'm standing here realizing that the greatest fortune I've received this year had nothing to do with stock portfolios or inheritance. It came in the form of a 3-year-old girl blowing me a kiss and her mother showing me what real strength looks like." He paused, and Emily saw him take a breath, steadying himself for whatever came next. "So I'm making a different kind of announcement tonight. The Harrington Foundation will be launching a new initiative, the Second Chances program. We'll be providing housing, childcare, job training, and support services for single parents trying to build stable lives for their children. Because I've seen firsthand what one person can accomplish when given an opportunity instead of judgment. And because the woman I love taught me that investing in people's potential is worth more than any business acquisition." The ballroom erupted. Some in applause, some in shocked whispers, Victoria in what looked like barely controlled fury as she stormed toward the exit. But Ethan was moving through the crowd now, his path direct and unwavering, heading straight for Emily. "That was insane," Emily breathed when he reached her, torn between exhilaration and terror. "You just publicly declared your intentions in front of everyone who matters in your world." "No," Ethan corrected gently, taking both her hands in his. "I publicly declared my intentions in front of a room full of strangers. The only person who matters is standing right in front of me, looking terrified and beautiful and like she might bolt any second." Margaret cleared her throat delicately. "I'm going to go check on the silent auction items and pretend I'm not watching this." But her smile was warm and encouraging as she slipped away, leaving them in their small island of privacy within the chaos. "Ethan, you need to think about this," Emily said desperately, even as her heart was already betraying her with hope. "The social consequences, the gossip, the way this changes everything." "I have thought about it," Ethan interrupted. "I've thought about nothing else for weeks. Emily, when I was sitting in that doctor's office wondering if I'd run out of time, do you know what I regretted? Not the business deals I hadn't closed or the properties I hadn't acquired. I regretted never having someone to come home to. Never having a child call me dad. Never taking the risk of being vulnerable enough to actually love someone." His grip on her hands tightened. "Then Lily blew me a kiss, and you looked at me with all your defenses up, ready to fight the world to protect her, and I thought, that's what bravery actually looks like. That's what I want to be part of." Tears burned behind Emily's eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper. "I'm scared of believing this is real, of letting Lily get more attached, of waking up one day and finding out this was temporary kindness that expired." "Then let me prove it," Ethan said fiercely. "Let me show you every day that this is real. Let me be there for Lily's bedtime stories and your bad days and every moment in between. Let me love you both the way you deserve to be loved, completely, permanently, without reservation." The declaration hung between them like a sacred thing, like the answer to prayers Emily had been too afraid to speak. Around them, the gala continued its mechanical social dance, but in their small corner of the world, everything had crystallized into this single moment of choice. "If I say yes," Emily said slowly, testing the words, "if I let myself believe this is real, you understand that I'm not just choosing for me? Lily's heart is in this too. She already calls you family. If this falls apart—" "It won't," Ethan promised. "Emily, I'm not asking you to trust blindly. I'm asking you to trust what we've already built. The dinners, the pancakes, the way Lily lights up when I come home, the way you've made that house feel like somewhere I actually want to be. That's not temporary. That's foundation." Emily looked into his eyes and saw only absolute certainty, only the kind of conviction that came from someone who'd faced mortality and chosen life. She thought about Lily asleep at home with Margaret's trusted housekeeper, clutching Mr. Whiskers and wearing the pajamas Ethan had bought her with cartoon pancakes on them because he'd remembered her favorite breakfast. She thought about all the small moments that had built into something undeniable. "Okay," she whispered, and then stronger, "yes. Let's do this. Let's be a family." Ethan's smile could have powered the entire ballroom, but before either of them could say anything else, a commotion near the entrance proved that Victoria Ashworth wasn't done causing damage, and the night's battles were far from over. Victoria's return to the ballroom carrying a folder full of what she clearly thought would be damning evidence lasted exactly as long as it took Margaret Harrington to intercept her with the practiced grace of someone who'd been handling social warfare for decades. Emily watched from across the room as Margaret said something quietly to Victoria that made the younger woman's face go pale, then furious, then finally defeated. Whatever Margaret had threatened or promised, it was effective. Victoria left again, this time for good, though her parting glare at Emily promised this wasn't truly over, just postponed. "What did your mother say to her?" Emily asked Ethan as they watched Margaret return to the auction tables like she'd merely been discussing weather. Ethan's smile was equal parts admiration and amusement. "Knowing my mother probably reminded Victoria that the Harrington family controls the boards of half the charities Victoria depends on for social relevance, and that publicly attacking me would have professional consequences Victoria can't afford." He shook his head. "My mother looks like society elegance, but she's absolutely ruthless when protecting family." The word family settled around Emily like a cloak she was finally allowing herself to wear. The rest of the gala passed in a blur of introductions, some genuine, some calculating, all tinged with the awareness that Ethan Harrington had just dramatically altered his social standing by claiming a housekeeper and her daughter as his chosen family. Emily fielded questions with Margaret's coaching, learning quickly that the secret to navigating high society was caring less about their approval than they expected. But it was later, back at the estate in the quiet hours after midnight, that the real transformation happened. They found Lily still awake despite the late hour, sitting with the housekeeper in the kitchen having emergency hot chocolate because of a nightmare about mean ladies. The moment she saw Ethan and Emily, she burst into tears of relief. "I dreamed the mean lady took you away," Lily sobbed into Ethan's shoulder as he scooped her up. "I dreamed you had to leave and I couldn't find Mama anywhere." Emily's heart shattered and reassembled simultaneously as she watched Ethan hold her daughter with the tenderness of someone who'd been made for this role. "Hey, look at me," Ethan said gently, brushing Lily's curls back from her tear-stained face. "No mean lady is ever taking me away from you. You know why? Because I'm going to ask your mama something very important, and I'm going to ask you something very important, and if you both say yes, then we're going to be together forever. Legally. Officially. In a way that no mean lady or anyone else can ever change." Lily's crying stopped, replaced by intense focus. "What are you going to ask?" Ethan set her down carefully, then took something from his pocket, a small blue velvet box that made Emily's breath catch. But instead of opening it immediately, he pulled out a second box, this one smaller, and knelt down to Lily's level. "First, I'm asking you, Lily Carter, if you would let me be your daddy for real. Not just pretend, not just a friend who lives in the same house, but your actual dad. The kind who gets to come to your school plays and teach you to ride a bike and tell you he loves you every single day. What do you think?" Lily's eyes went wide, processing this with the seriousness it deserved. Then she launched herself at Ethan with a tackle hug that nearly knocked him over. "Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I wanted you to be my daddy since the pancakes." Ethan's laugh was wet with emotion as he hugged her back. When he finally extracted himself, he opened the smaller box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a heart charm. "This is a promise. You're my daughter, Lily. From now until forever." Emily was openly crying now, watching Ethan fasten the bracelet around Lily's small wrist with shaking hands. When he finally stood and turned to Emily, his eyes were bright with hope and fear and absolute certainty all at once. "Emily Carter," he said, opening the larger box to reveal a ring that was beautiful but not ostentatious, a single diamond that caught the light like captured starlight. "I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking you to build a new world with me. One where pancakes matter more than portfolios, where kindness is the measure of success, and where a 3-year-old's blown kiss can change everything. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air like every hope Emily had been too afraid to voice, every dream she dismissed as impossible. She looked at Lily, bouncing with barely contained excitement, her new bracelet glinting in the kitchen light. She looked at Ethan, this man who'd taken a moment of connection and built it into something transformative. "Yes," Emily said, her voice strong despite the tears. "Yes, we'll build that world with you." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger with reverent care, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and salt and the future taking shape. Lily cheered, Mr. Whiskers meowed for attention, and somewhere in the background, Emily could hear Margaret on the phone already planning a wedding that would probably scandalize and delight society in equal measure. But the real magic wasn't in the ring or the proposal or even the grand gesture at the gala. It was in the quiet weeks that followed, as Ethan began the legal process to adopt Lily officially. It was in the first meeting of the Second Chances Program Advisory Board, where Emily's lived experience became the foundation for helping other single parents. It was in the morning Lily called Ethan "Daddy" without prompting, and the way he'd had to excuse himself to cry in private. It was in the small moments that built into a life, the pancake Sundays that became tradition, the family movie nights where Lily always fell asleep between them, the way the Harrington estate slowly transformed from a museum into a home that echoed with laughter and belonging. 6 months after that first blown kiss, on a spring morning filled with possibility, Emily stood in the estate gardens wearing a simple wedding dress, Lily beside her in a flower girl outfit she'd insisted match Mr. Whiskers' bow tie, and married the man who'd proven that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories began with the smallest acts of innocent kindness. The Harrington Foundation's Second Chances program went on to help hundreds of single parents find stability and hope. But for Emily, the real legacy was simpler and more profound. It was in teaching Lily that love didn't have prerequisites, that family was built on choice and commitment, and that sometimes, when you were brave enough to blow a kiss into the unknown, the universe conspired to build you something beautiful in return.